All right, y'all. Let's get into this breakdown of Luke chapter 21. So, Luke 21 finishes the presentation of Jesus in Jerusalem and as the Messiah of the Jews. This lays a foundation for the Passion narrative, the final days before Jesus is crucified. Luke 19:28 through 20:47 covered most of the discussion about his authority, which are complete with his words about the widow's sacrificial suffering. Luke 21 1 through 4. The rest of the chapter records his warnings to the disciples about the violence they, the temple, Jerusalem, and the world will face between his ascension and his return. Matthew 24 and Mark 12:41 through 13:37 covers the same material. So let's get into this breakdown. Part 1. Luke 21 records the last of Jesus' teaching before the Last Supper, his arrest, and his crucifixion. Luke 21 1 through 4 would easily fit with the context of Luke chapter 20, Jesus' claims of authority among the religious leaders. The poor widow is a foil for the scribes. In Luke 20:45 through 47, the widow gives to the temple treasury with no fanfare. The scribes dress for the attention they crave. The widow gives her last 2 copper coins to the scribes, engaging in unfair business practices and devour widows' houses. Luke 20:47. By condemning the scribes and praising the widows, Jesus claims authority over the religious leaders in their expectations, values, and traditions. All right, Jesus. So Luke 21 5 through 6 begins Jesus's prophecies about the coming days in the end times. This group of prophecies is primarily oriented toward the Jews, although some events will also affect Gentiles. The disciples comment on the majesty of the temple. Jesus tells them the temple will be destroyed. Luke 21 7 through 11 continues Jesus' prophecies. The disciples ask for a sign of the impending destruction of the temple. Jesus responds first with a sampling of the deceit and disasters that will come upon the world during the church age. In Luke 21 12 through 19, Jesus backtracks and describes what his disciples will face as they build the church. In Luke 21 20 through 24, Jesus gives more details about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Matthew and Mark would word this as a double prophecy, which also refers to the events during the tribulation. Luke is more deliberate about drawing a distinction between the two events. Luke 21 25 through 28 describes Jesus' second coming at the end of the tribulation. In Luke 21 29 through 33, Jesus applies the disciples' question about the signs of the fall of Jerusalem to his second coming. If they pay attention, the timing of the return of the Son of Man will be obvious. Luke 21 34 through 36 explains that Jesus' followers should do what Jesus' followers should do in the meantime. Avoid anything that impairs judgment, be prepared, and pray that God will bring deliverance from the horrors to come. Oh, that's so good. So Luke 21 37 through 38 is an aside explaining that since the triumphal entry, Jesus has slept on the Mount of Olives at night and taught at the temple during the day. This flows into Luke 22 1 through 6, which explains that chief priests and scribes have been trying to kill Jesus. They cannot because he spends his days in the temple teaching crowds of people, but Judas provides a solution, his funky tail self. I'm sorry. The rest of Luke 22 gives the account of the Last Supper and Jesus' betrayal, arrest, and trial before the Sanhedrin. So let's get into the breakdown. Part 2. Luke chapter 2 has 3 main themes: a poor widow's generous offering, Jesus' prophecy of Jerusalem's destruction and the sign that will precede it, and a call to the disciples to remain watchful and prepare for future events. The chapter connects these themes by using the destruction of Jerusalem as a type of foreshadowing for the last days, liking signs like wars, distress with both events, and emphasizing the need for constant readiness. So let's break this down a little bit more. Number 1, the widow's offering, verses 1 through 4. Jesus observes a poor widow giving 2 small coins to the temple's treasury. He tells his disciples that she gave more than the wealthy who gave out their abundance. highlighting her profound generosity and devotion. Number 2, prophecy of Jerusalem's destructions, verses 5 through 24. Jesus foretold that the temple will be completely destroyed, a shocking statement to his disciples who admire its magnificence. He lists signs that will precede this destruction, including false messiahs, wars, earthquakes, famines, and persecutions. He specifically states that when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, its destruction is near. He advises his followers to flee the city to safety. The chapter notes that this destruction occurred in 70 AD when the Romans conquered the city. Number 3, call to be watchful, verses 25 through 38. Jesus shifts to discussing the future events, including his second coming, using the destruction of Jerusalem as a point of comparison. He warns his followers to be on guard against sins like drunkenness and the worries of life, so that the day of his return does not catch them by surprise. That's really good. The chapter urges believers to stay alert, pray for strength, and be ready to stand before the Son of Man at any time. The parable of the fig tree is used to teach that signs will indicate that the time of redemption is near and that believers should be attentive to them. Be watchful. That's it, and that's all. All right, y'all, so that's all I have for the breakdown of Luke chapter 21. I'll see you guys later. Bye.